Steve. I see Corey. I see Anna. I see Megan. Boom, boom, boom. Let me see if I see any speakers yet, because I don't see them yet. Let's see. Do we have Salesforce in the house? 20 people here. They are here. Can they come on? The crowd is waiting with anticipation.
Hello.
Hello.
I think Marlinda should be here too. Sorry, I was just setting up my mic and everything.
You're doing the mic. Yeah. Good head collection I see there behind you.
How are things going?
They're good. They're really fun. It's we still have about 50 people here today, and everybody's really. I think it's people are like sincerely learning a lot and enjoying this festival. So that's really nice. And thank you for hi Marlinda.
Hi.
So it's been very good so far. So thank you for doing this. And I think we're about most people stretch their legs and get a cup of coffee in between sessions. So I recommend waiting a few more minutes. And we had about 50 people. So I think once we're sort of in the 30s, if you don't start kicking it off, I think we should be good to go.
That's good.
Yeah, sounds good.
At one point I will appear, and then it's time. But I guess you're the last one. You can go for hours if you want to do 10 hours. Be my guest. You want to put in 10 hours?
Oh my God. What time is it there for you right now, Hans?
Oh wow, it's 8:30 again already. Yeah, evening. Yeah. Today was okay. Today was only what time did we start? We started at 2, so it's only 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday we did about 14 hours. That sounded like a good idea at the time. We were like, sure. And then, that's a terrible idea. But no, but it's fun, and I think like the big themes is really inclusivity. So I think that it's really fun. People come at it from different angles, and we all put it very high on our list of priorities. So I think it's a very good fit of what we're all learning. So. Oh, Steve is actually going to go back and do some work tomorrow. Yeah, we robbed people of 2 days of their lives by teaching about conversational AI. I'll leave you to it. Take your time, enjoy, and we got folks for you in the chat. And also, I know David said that. So people, if they, you can bring people onto the stage and they can kind of show themselves through camera and talk, or you can just kind of keep an eye on the chat and do it that way. It's whatever you prefer and enjoy.
Yeah, actually, quick question on that. So sorry, I'm looking for where I can add people. How would I do that?
So I now see Peter swim, who probably accidentally clicked. Do you see him in the left corner of the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we would now, Peter probably misclicked, but I'm just gonna. So if you hover over him, you see like the little green plus. So I'm clicking that now, and then he should appear. Well, he's not. But in general, that should work. Like if somebody's over there, you click on them, they show up.
Okay.
Yeah. Off you go. You got this. Enjoy, everybody. See, we're already at 37 now.
Got it. Okay. Well, I guess we can just go ahead and get started. First of all, I just want to say thank you to CDI and for everyone who organized this incredible event. Always love being here. Really excited to talk to everyone about what we've been working on and will continue to work on. Because as Hans said earlier, like diversity and inclusion really is the way of the future right now. We see many, oh, wait a second, I'm starting. Jason, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm bringing it up. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, jump in, but the panic isn't that bad. Yeah.
We can roll it back from the beginning once I get this set up.
Are you struggling on your end, or are you just because it's the button next to the
It's
setting?
just a little slow.
Uh,
I'm almost there. Just setting up my tabs and everything.
wow, people, this is all live. This is all happening right now.
It's recorded. Can we cut this part out? Like you cut it, right? You edit these things.
Yes.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Give me a sec. Here we are. All right. Sorry about that, Marlinda.
No worries. It's all part of the process. But so, like I was saying, basically, diversity and inclusion is the way of the future. We see many businesses swiftly responding to customer needs around representation and validation of historically underrepresented minorities in the business setting. This is even more evident when the user interface for business tools is language itself. At Salesforce, our top value is trust, closely followed by customer success. When it comes to conversational AI, in order to build trust, users need to feel heard by the product and thereby represented in the data on which the product is trained. And their inclusion and adoption of the experience helps drive customer success. So today, Jason and I are going to walk you through how we address this social, market, and customer need at Salesforce in conversation design. I lead design strategy and production for cutting-edge conversational products across the company's CRM product suite. But before diving in, I also wanted to give a really quick shout out to Greg Bennett, who is our director of conversation design, and also to Brent Lang, who used to be on our team, and I know he's in the audience, but has moved to a different opportunity outside of Salesforce. Without them both, we would not be here today. And Jason is here with me, as he is now going to be taking lead on this project. Jason?
Thanks, Marlinda. So I work on implementing conversation design in Salesforce product strategy, so future-facing work, and maintaining and expanding our understanding of intents. We're excited to share with the community what we've been doing around diversity and inclusion in conversational experiences here at Salesforce. So we'll talk a little bit about the problem. I think it's pretty clear, diversity and inclusion in terms of like our chatbot models. But the problem really started with us as a team recognizing that there's a wide gap between the kinds of English that virtual assistants are able to understand and the kinds of English that they don't. The reason why is that they're trained on biased data. So oftentimes bots get trained on a variety of English that is very representative of, say, a mid-30s, mid-40s white male from Mountain View, California. Unfortunately, not all of our users everywhere are like that or speak like that person. Well, I guess that's not really an unfortunate case. We really value diversity and inclusion, and everyone should be free to live in whatever location, whatever locale. And we're trying to really work on making sure that our bot models recognize that. But the fact that so many of our models are representative of just that mid-30s, mid-40s developer, it is really sad because that means that our chatbot models are not able to really recognize the needs of our users and really help them access our products. That means that folks who do not speak that variety of English have a harder time having the bot understand them and execute tasks against their goals. So the solution here is to be able to increase the varieties of English that a bot can understand by essentially feeding the bot linguistically inclusive training data. I'm sure you've heard the term garbage in and garbage out. That's not to say that that mid-30s, mid-40s developer, their particular variety of English is garbage or not. We love all language varieties at Salesforce, and that's definitely an important one to index against. But really what we mean is the accents or the diction of a particular language variety, that people who speak this language variety will have a harder time accessing the product, as I said, than those on which the bot has been trained. This has all kinds of issues with intent recognition, all kinds of issues with how a bot might respond. It becomes not just a usability issue, but an accessibility issue, as I was saying. So if we consider folks who have language aphasia or other conditions that affect the way they produce language, this affects how they might interact with the bot. We want to bring these users into the fold. We want to bring everyone into the fold and make them feel heard in the product experience. And from a business perspective, this is a great thing because it ultimately grows our total addressable market.
So that's how we ended up starting the Inclusive Training Data Project. It's an initiative at Salesforce by which we are collecting utterances from people who speak US English dialects that we don't often see represented in conversational AI training data. We'll get more into that in a moment. Then, once we've collected data for these dialects or varieties, we build a library of those data so that other teams at Salesforce can easily make their own bots as inclusive as possible. We're setting a standard based on the data on what should be considered table stakes for conversational experiences. This is no longer optional in this day and age. The virtual assistant should be able to understand multiple English varieties. We're also creating a framework about how we can go about collecting this data at scale, so that way we can continue to expand and iterate on a quick basis.
So through everything that we've said already, it's likely becoming clear now that these ongoing efforts to recognize and remove bias from our conversation design process at Salesforce is part of a continued and overarching effort of the company as a whole to promote our values of diversity and inclusion. As Marlinda said, our top value is trust, but one of our top 5 values is diversity, recognizing diversity within our company and within our customers. Of course, this effort has clear business value, like I was saying, and that it allows us to meet our customers as they are, form more touch points with them, and continue our customer relationships. But we need to remember that language diversity and diversity itself, recognition of unique perspectives, this all stands on its own because it allows people to feel heard, understood, and trusted as they are. It's not something that necessarily needs to have business value. It's just nice that it does because it means that we can continue pushing these efforts forward. So we'll get into the meat and potatoes of things in terms of the training data themselves. So we prioritized initially 4 dialects: African American English, Chicano English, Southern US English, and English as a second language broadly. The reason why we picked these 4 categories is because they're what we at Salesforce have observed in our data and what we've observed as versions or varieties of English that tend to be historically underrepresented in the conversation design or conversational AI community at large. If you look at the distribution of American English dialects on the graphics on the screen in the bottom right, this is just a location distribution. You'll notice in the bottom right there, the Southern US makes up a sizable chunk of the continental US. It's something that often doesn't necessarily get targeted and accounted for, and bots don't necessarily get trained on those. So we want to make sure to include these varieties of English in our data, and we hope to include all of these other varieties as well in the future. It's just that the Southern US English one is the most prominent and the most present at current time. This also brings to mind the conversation of the idea that there's a correct or proper English to force people to speak. And that's definitely not the case. You know, we all have different quirks and different like individuality in terms of our English, and at large, like there are so many different demographic strata that affect this. We'll talk about this a little later in the next slide, but in terms of having people speak a certain English, that's just not something that's proper within the conversational AI community. It's not something that we see as something valid in like the overarching like, linguistics discourse either. And we want people to be able to speak their own English, speak as they are in their own homes and private lives and in public as well. So in terms of the other dialect or variety that I haven't spoken on yet, English as a second language, you'll notice that this is something that's very vague, I guess. There are so many different first languages or primary languages that someone might have. So in terms of this, to clarify, in terms of our methodology, we didn't set any hard and fast rules about what that first language is, as long as it wasn't English. So it's very possible that someone could speak Chicano English and their first language might be Spanish, and we could index their data in both the Chicano English one and the English as a second language variety. But we're definitely trying to include more individuals than making sure people are categorized in both. So now to that demographic strata that I was talking about, we definitely want to balance against this. So for example, one thing is gender identity. We don't want to overly sample people who identify as female versus people who identify as male or non-binary or any other gender identity. We wanted to get as close as we could to a distribution across each. So although you can see from our sample in terms of our descriptive stats, there are fewer folks who identify as non-binary. They're less represented there than we'd like. This is an ongoing effort for us. We'll continue sampling against that in the future. But other demographic information that we looked at included race, education level, and age. All of these different social strata and others tend to affect language use. And so that's something that we wanted to control for and also measure to make sure We're getting rid of any bias or recognizing any bias to a degree, where the main variable itself is the variety of English, and it's just a whole constellation of other varieties that there might be that we need to make sure that we keep in check. Marlinda, are you there? You're on mute, I think.
Sorry. Yes. So many tech things. You would think by now we would know. So in terms of the library, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for various teams at Salesforce to build a conversational app that is intent-enabled using this data. So for example, if a product team was going to create a chatbot and wants to enable an intent such as report an issue, they don't have to source those utterances themselves. It's something that we can just provide because we already collected it through this project. As of right now, we have over 24,000 utterances collected across about 530 research participants. And the process for that was leveraging your traditional sociolinguistic field methods to set up our sort of remote digital-first world version of collecting utterances as it pertains to a particular intent. And we started with defining what we mean by chatbot, then providing an example scenario, and then asked them what they would type in that situation. Then we asked for a couple of variations for how else they would say that. And we went in with very explicit instructions about not overthinking spelling, punctuation, or grammar. Because if they were to do that, that would basically erase a lot of the linguistic variety and variation that we were trying to collect in the first place. And it would just defeat the whole purpose of the project. And then we partnered with a third-party vendor to be able to help us reach these research participants and collect the data.
So in terms of setting a standard, we really wanted to be able to put a stake in the ground, not only at Salesforce, but in the industry, and say there's plenty of research and research methodology out here that we can leverage from other fields to be able to do this at scale. And that's not only fields in industry, that's also academic work. So several of our colleagues in Salesforce have a background in sociolinguistics. I myself am not a sociolinguist, although I've done a little bit of study of linguistics, but I learn a lot from working with them. And one thing they've brought to the table is how to sample and target specific language varieties or flavors of a given language, and then elicit that from a person without overly biasing them. You'll get what this means a little later, probably during our workshop, but I'll give a quick example now to try to explain how hard of a task this is. So Greg, our boss, he does this great bit on the word orange. I won't explain myself. I won't embarrass myself right now, and I won't explain that example until later. But we'll talk more on this later during the workshop portion, and you'll hear more of it later. But one example that I like to use because it's just much easier for me and one I hear commonly, even though it's supposed to be a location geographic thing in the United States. So you've probably heard some people say the word crayon, others say the word crown, and others say crayon. So there are so many ways to say. I only gave 3 examples, but it's a bit easier for me to pronounce this example compared to the orange one since I'm not great at specific accents. But you can see that it's also good to note here how I have trouble with the orange example. Someone might have trouble differentiating with the crayon example. So that really shows how this is sort of an effort for diverse representation in data that needs to be collaborative, because there are so many different examples you might not think of or might even be able to notice without the help of other individuals. But anyway, that brings to mind the question of how would you get this sort of data? What sort of sociolinguistic field methods are you using? Because you can't necessarily just ask someone at point blank, how do you pronounce crayon? That would instantly bias them, create some demand characteristics, and stop them from really speaking their own English. We'll get into that later, but it really stems from, as we said, a sociolinguistics sort of approach of language first, asking open-ended questions to elicit as much language as possible, language that is that person's, that is unbiased. Basically, you kind of play a big game of taboo.
Exactly. It really is like playing a big game of taboo. And I think leveraging that method is really key, especially if you can't see your customers' data due to privacy reasons, or you don't have access to recordings or transcripts of live calls or chats that you can train on. And this is something where we can hopefully put forward a standard or practical method of how to go about doing this at scale and impact both the ethical AI space as well as the field of conversation design. It's something that we hope that as a method, as previously explained, that we hope it's something that people can quickly pick up and run with themselves in their teams and their organizations. And in basing our work on sociolinguistics, we leverage a lot in terms of how to responsibly collect diverse data. While the world of sociolinguistics has evolved over a great deal over the last 50 years, something that has been of utmost importance in the more recent years is that sociolinguists have been greatly discussing what it means to collect data from these historically underrepresented populations or vulnerable populations and how to make sure they're included in the process. That's particularly why we worked with a third-party vendor who we feel has their own compensation method and relationship with their participants. And we also wanted to make sure that we weren't overly sampling in one area ourselves. We're also very intentional about selecting these particular linguistic varieties because we have seen in the industry that these 4 varieties have been lacking in representation. And as I mentioned, they're informed by standard sociolinguistic field methods to promote the collection of natural variations that occur in a given English variety. That could be anything from the sound level, like what Jason mentioned about the word crayon, to the word level like pop instead of soda, to the sentence level in terms of word order. In terms of the impact this has had on our company, it's allowing us to say that we truly live by our values of meeting the users where they are. You can't say that you're meeting the user where they are when it comes to a conversational product if you don't meet them in how they speak. And we are officially going after the types of language construction that signify and represent these varieties of English that have yet to be fully incorporated into conversation design. So we're making our bots flexible enough to understand a dialect or a variety of US English without issue because we're representing it in the US corpus. The bot consumes it, and this in turn increases our overall total addressable market where hopefully our bots and conversational apps at Salesforce can be seen across the industry as the most inclusive and easiest to use because as a user, I don't have to change the way that I speak in order to be understood.
So as Marlinda said in the very beginning, we're currently working on transitioning this project ownership over to me. We'll definitely still have Marlinda's expertise. We're on the same team, so definitely be learning from her as we transition it over, and also I'll still be able to consult with her. But expanding it. Sorry, Marlinda, what was that?
You kind of like paused for a moment. Your screen. Yeah, you're back now. It's fine.
Oh, where did I cut off, or did I?
A little bit, just for a second. You're back.
Okay. So I can just keep going on. So in terms of what we're working on expanding the project on in the second run and in future runs, we initially worked on intents that could be seen as highly global. So the sorts of intents that you could see in any chatbot experience, say connecting to an agent. But now we're working on adding more specificity to the Salesforce product now. So this means, we're working on, in terms of like future product, making sure that we collect from a variety of intents that are specific to our different clouds, and also specific to different industry customers. From this diverse data that we're collecting, we're not just looking to necessarily feed into our product improved models. We're also trying to improve capability on our parts to understand where our customers are going, what they might want, meaning that we're actually shaping product around this process of collecting new utterance data. Because of validating these utterances really shows us specifically what our customers are asking for in terms of what they want, and also shows us like how much they really want this, like what is the actual stake in accomplishing certain tasks and how they view these tasks. So this is also important in terms of focusing on specific industries because we also get to pose scenarios such as a healthcare one, where there are different rules and standards in place than what you might expect from just a standard chatbot that doesn't have to deal with privacy or data security regulation in healthcare. That's mainly it for our next set of expansion, other than the other historically underrepresented varieties that we're looking at are going to be Filipino English, Indian English, and English from UK or Australian speakers. But these this data is still coming in and something that we're still looking at, so we'll have more to say on that in the future. For now, I guess we'll stop and answer a couple questions before we jump into the workshop portion, unless you have something else, Marlinda?
It looks like we have just a few questions. So Morgan is asking how this applies to chatbot products where there is no audio. Let's see. Right. So actually, the data that we're collecting right now is heavily focused on chat. So to answer Flavia's question, we have not really gone into voice just yet. That's like later down the line.
And to expand a little on that, like Marlinda was saying before, that this isn't just a sort of like accent or vocal thing. So I gave the example of crayon. This is also like a word level detail, and you'll see a lot more of this in the workshop, or we'll try to tease out some of these different pieces like from the audience. But in terms of like say the word soda or pop, like diction level also matters. You can think about how for a large portion of the continental US, there isn't really a second plural pronoun. It's a you all, you folks, versus, for Southern English, as we mentioned as like one of the varieties that we're indexing against, there's a y'all. So there's definitely other pieces that we need to train our bot models on, and other ways to do that in terms of chat.
I think there are no other questions, unless someone has any more. We can just go ahead and...
There's one from Flavia. Marlinda, do you want to talk about this one? Have you guys been thinking about including data from people with speech disabilities as well?
Yes, that is also later down the line. We're starting with this, seeing how well we can scale it. And then I think that's going to require a different... So we have like our sort of instructions, and we are still trying to expand that. And small but mighty team at Salesforce, so one thing at a time. But yes, like that is something that we're looking to do.
Yep, and I think we mentioned a little earlier in the presentation as well about how like one of the like reasons behind this, or in our thinking behind this, we were thinking about like not only people with different accents, not only people who speak different dialects, but also people who might have like aphasias. So definitely thinking about that as we continue forward to try to scale this process.
And Hans has a question too. Like, how would enterprises do this work themselves, or should they lean and trust on Salesforce to actually have done this work? That's a really good question. Yeah, I was thinking about that, because it's not like, just trust me. Like I've done the work, and I've done it right. Like, no. I think right now Greg is still sort of in discussions with the product teams about how they're going to go about like distributing this information widely. Right now, we're doing it internally. So again, sorry, I don't have any concrete answers, but yes, like it's on the agenda.
Yeah, we continue to say on the agenda, but I think outside of that, in terms of like how would enterprises do this work themselves, I think we're going to attempt to show some of our methodology in our workshop, or at least try to explain like how this sort of works, and what we're doing. And so people in the audience can try to mirror it and bring it home, in order to improve the quality and also the inclusivity of their own utterance collection. I think this last one, Marlinda, maybe you could speak to before we jump into the workshop. Flavia asks, how can we request our AI vendors to be more inclusive with their solutions? Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, I think what has helped over here at Salesforce is that we actually have a lot of sociolinguists on the team, and so I guess it really helps. I don't have any answers of like how you would go about that if you didn't have a sociolinguist, but maybe that's something like that the conversation design community needs to start sort of thinking about broadly, because like I learned a lot from Greg and all the other linguists who, because I'm not a linguist. I came from nursing background, so, and also not a non-tech background, and I'm just learning so much from the team about like the methods that they're bringing to the project. And so I don't have any hard answers on that one either, but I do see an importance, and I think as a conversation designer, I probably would like to, myself, I can answer for myself. I'm going to start learning just a few basic like methodologies like that we're going to show you today, and a little more. We have a couple more sociolinguists on the team, and so I'm just like picking their brains all the time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Marlinda here. Like definitely learning from others, going to these kinds of workshops, trying to create this conversation with the conversation design community at large is very important. But in terms of requesting from your AI vendors, one thing that we always go back to, but isn't necessarily always going to work, is just like going back to the data, right? If you start to see people, your customers, your users, who are not being understood, and you notice a specific pattern, and this is where that sort of like sociolinguist training comes in, or that sort of like recognition comes in, then you can go to them with that and say, like, I think this data isn't really what we're looking for because our models aren't accurate enough. Like we're not able to really assist our customers, and you can see it here and here. I think that's the best that I can say right now. Of course, that's going to be hard because that requires a lot of qualitative work, but a lot of the time this research is very qualitative. So that's just how it is currently, and hopefully it'll improve as we move on.
So with that, if there aren't any more questions, we can jump into the workshop portion.
All right, so it'll take a bit for us to get this workshop up and going. Marlinda, do you want to send the link in the chat while
Sure.
I share it, or change the sharing settings?
I think I did. I went ahead and did that.
Oh, great, perfect. So we'll actually be using FigJam for this workshop. Try to make it a little more interactive, and we'll also be using breakout rooms. Should we share screen still, Marlinda, so people who don't jump on FigJam can still look?
Yeah, we should. Yeah.
Okay. Let me just move things around a little bit, and then all right, should be up now. All right, so like we said, this workshop is really going to go into some primary sociolinguistics field methods, or at least like the thinking and framework that one might need to approach this kind of work. So we really believe that we need to do these activities and have this discussion so that we not only foreground the issue of a lack of diversity and inclusion in our data and equity there, but also to really like actually act on these issues. And we need to properly format and approach the ways we put on these activities, or else we might, like indirectly be reinforcing some issues with diversity. Anyway, we can start with activity 1. Marlinda, do you want to ask some of our initial questions or talk a little bit about the New York Times quiz in the right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, this is just a fun quiz. I don't know how many people have actually seen this, but it's a quiz that kind of goes into like, how do you usually say this? And then I think there's like a series of 25 questions, and then it'll kind of, at the end of the quiz, tell you like what kind of a speaker you are, if you're more of like East Coast or West Coast, depending on your answers. So that's just a fun thing that you can do on the side.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that it's mainly for participants with a US variety of English. It's not going to help too much with identifying like English as a second language speakers, sorry, or people abroad, unless you mainly learned a similar dialect or variety as one that would mirror that in the US.
Yes. Oh, we should I wish we could like have other people create more of these quizzes for world Englishes. But for the, I guess we're just gonna dive into the first activity, and I see people already putting their answers in. For this, the question is, what's an observation about your English that has been made from the perspective that is non-standard? So we can do that and then see if we can give you 10 minutes to do this part. Jason, did you start a timer?
Yeah, I'll start a timer now. But some other questions to think about are was English your primary or first language? Was it your second? Was it your third? What other languages might you speak that might influence the way you speak English? And then we also have, the unfortunate question of, like, has there been a time when you've been criticized or made fun of for the way that you speak? Sorry, the way that you speak English. And that's definitely something that's in play here. Definitely something that we need to recognize. Yeah, so I'll set the timer for 10 minutes now. And then do we maybe want to hop into breakout rooms, Marlinda?
Do we want to break out now or after the 10 minutes?
Let's do it 5 minutes in.
Okay. And then I guess in the breakouts, we want people to sort of discuss those things and then come back and then see what we find, if anyone has anything interesting to share. Actually, while everyone's doing this, like there was something I really I learned recently, that in Indian English there is the word called prepone, and I thought that was so interesting, which is the opposite of postpone, and it makes so much sense. Although in like standard American English, it's not used, but I feel like we should. I think instead of saying like let's move this meeting 2 days earlier, let's prepone this. It's so much more easier to say that. So Gosh, I was so fascinated by this word, and I can't help but wonder, like, what other words out there that exist that are similar to this?
Yeah, I think the prepone example is great because we probably all thought about the example of like, oh, how might you schedule something through a chatbot? Or like thinking about like working through a calendar through a conversational interface. So, I mean, the word prepone just makes a lot of sense there, where a lot of other like, diction or, yeah, or vocab things might not necessarily feel that applicable to our professional context.
But I know this word is also widely used in, I guess, for like in what is it, Indian English variety, like it's widely used. So if you were to deploy a bot in India and the bot doesn't understand prepone, I feel like that is unfortunate.
Yep, I feel that, Steve. At one of my first chatbot like jobs, I essentially had a task for like just a whole week of trying to catalog all the ways someone said hello, someone said yes, someone said no, and misspellings included too. It's pretty lengthy. So we're at the 6 minute mark. So Marlinda, you know how to work the breakout rooms?
Yes, let's try that. Okay. If I click on it, okay. How many people? How many people should we put in a room?
We have 39 people, so maybe he's subtracting us, maybe 4 to a room.
Got it. Okay. And we want to give them about 10 minutes.
Let's just give them 4 minutes, I think, because we only have 20 minutes left. We still have 2 activities, so.
Okay, got it. Okay, sending everybody to the breakout rooms.
And Marlinda will stay in this meeting room.
Yep.
Okay. Hello. So, in my room, someone immediately left after joining, so it's just me and Megan. Let's give Megan permission to come aboard, and we can be our own room.
Okay.
And then, is there a way to message all of the breakout rooms so that if someone is alone, they can come back and talk with us?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the chat should work.
How's it going, Megan?
Very well. Today's been really great, actually. Every session has been unique. which I really appreciate. And I think this one's a really great way to end the day.
I'm glad to hear. Do you have any recommendations? I actually haven't been able to tune in since I've been at work the whole time.
Oh, what? Oh my gosh. Which one did I really like today? All of them. So the session previous to this, it really did a deep dive into more of the build aspects, like more of the technology portions and integration. And as someone who comes from more of like the design side, it was really nice to hear that, because a lot of that's still beyond me, even though I'm curious about it. So I would definitely check out that one specifically.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that one out. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Marlinda.
I was gonna ask, like, were they focusing on a particular tool?
So it was for Airy, open source
Okay.
tool that has a lot of integration points, which I never heard of Airy before. So this was really a great overview in general. But yeah, so it was like a good breakdown of that, and just general best practices when you're talking about building out a whole conversational system. Hello.
Hey, Duke.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing well. Duke is actually one of our coworkers at Salesforce, also a conversation designer. So,
Hey.
Hi,
yeah.
many fun.
Would either of you like to share an example of, sorry, recovering from COVID right now, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, share an example of a variety, like a specific or like particular thing about their variety of English.
Yeah, I have like both in writing and speaking, so it's not only like voice. So for voice first, like it's so hard for us who don't use English regularly, and even people nowadays learn a lot of English in school, but still because we didn't use it every day, a lot of people in Thailand doesn't like pronounce correctly. Like when I moved to Hawaii at first, and then we are in the cafeteria, and I'll say like banana, and no one understand what I'm saying, and they will tease me like that word forever. And I don't mind their teasing, but I tell them like you can tease me as much as you want, but you have to correct me how to make it correct. And then because I can't catch it, like how do I make it correct? And then at the end, my coworkers told me like, "Oh, you just say banana, like not banana, just banana." So it's the word pronounced a in the first word is not supposed to be ba, like banana. Hi, hon.
Hello.
So they don't catch that word.
Yeah.
Also, when I write something, I miss a lot of like article ander because we don't use it in Thai language. And also the same thing, we don't put the syntax of adjective in front of noun like English. So sometimes I have kind of dyslexia to switch the word because I don't know like, and also you guys have ing and ed at the end of the word, and which is totally different meaning, right? Like interesting and interested, and that is another thing that we are always confused. Like, how should I use this? Like ed or ing?
I think for me, just coming from, so I'm originally from the East Coast, so New Jersey, New York area, and they have a particular kind of accent. I've had to refine how I speak a lot. When I moved, especially to the Midwest, they would pick on me a lot. I legit had, I think my college roommate invited me to her hometown so they could all just listen to how funny I sounded and joke about it. Which again, it's like, it's okay to get, like friendly ribbing, but I've had to learn how to pronounce my words a little bit differently so I could be understood. Even just a difference of a few states. So if you go to New Jersey and you want to play video games, you say I'm playing Mario. Anywhere else in the country, they're going to say Mario. I still sometimes say Mario, but also on the East Coast, people tend to speak a lot faster. I've had to work on my diction to slow it down. So if you are really anyone on the East Coast, but then also specifically Puerto Rican, you're spitting out words like, mile a second, and it's outside of that tri-state area. It can be really frustrating for folks to be understood because we're just used to speaking really fast.
Yeah. Greg was like giving that example yesterday, comparing like New York speakers and California speakers, where Californians tend to like, oh, you're saying something, let me pause, like let you speak. And then New York people were like, they talk over each other. And so I guess when these two speakers meet, the New York person will find that the California person, you're boring, you're uninteresting, or you don't find me interesting because you're not interrupting me. And like that's totally opposite for California speakers, where now I'm gonna probably think that this New York speaker is like, you're rude, you're not giving me space to speak. And so like it becomes an attack on their character rather than speaking style. And so that's another thing that I wish people really understood when it comes to communication. Is just, you grew up in a certain place and you learn these like, you have your way of speaking, but outside of the world, it's just not like that. It's always hard for us to like move outside of our own experience, right? It's always like it's really hard to like put ourselves in another person's shoes. But like one example I have that I don't think is like totally related, but like Filipino speakers don't have gendered pronouns. So they just it's really they. And when they move over to English, they'll say the wrong pronoun for a person. Like we'll call it he, she, and they get made fun of. Like I just thought of that since we're talking about people getting made fun of. It's like they get it, they know it. It's just that in their language, they don't know which one to use. Or like coming here, they get confused because it doesn't exist in Filipino. So I guess, did anybody want to welcome everybody from the breakout rooms. Oh my God, sorry. Just having discussion here. Does anybody want to come up on stage maybe and talk about and share anything that they spoke of? How do they would have to request to be.
I think it's really interesting in general that the pace of speech also actually Brent resonates with him to the East Coast, West Coast, that is such a main thing. And I grew up in Friesland, so it's a very tiny province in the Netherlands. So I grew up speaking Frisian, and then when I moved to Amsterdam, I grew up bilingual, but it was the first time where I started to realize that I actually didn't speak Dutch very well. Because where I grew up, it's like whatever Dutch you use that gets the job done is good enough, because they're passionate about Frisian. And then all of a sudden you're like at that age where you want to fit in and hang out with the cool kids. You're like, oh God, I don't think I actually speak Dutch. and then they make fun of my accent and stuff. And then I had this period where I had this artificial posh Dutch voice. It made no sense whatsoever, but I was overcompensating, and now I think I've averaged out a little bit.
I have the other one that's it's a culture. I think language is culture thing, because I went to China with my friend, and she warned me at the beginning, okay, you come to Shanghai, don't be shocked. Yeah, and don't think that people are fighting to each other. They're just talking. And I was I don't understand at first. And then when I get there, I'm like, oh, I know what you mean. Because we went to the public place, and then some people just talk to each other I'm like, are you fighting? She's like, no, I'm just talking. Because I don't hear what they say, but I just hear the reaction of the language to each other. Yeah, that's about the cultures. Kind of interesting.
That's also not even language, but so here the weather is always bad, but we have immigrants, particularly from the Dutch Caribbean, that moved to Amsterdam, and they're used to standing outside and hanging out and being part of the community, and they live their lives outside. So a lot of times when they when you have new people moving into the neighborhood, people used to be a little intimidated because it felt like gangs hanging out on the street, but it was just people chatting in a normal way. So it wasn't even the language they used, it was just where they interacted with each other outside rather than inside, which is also such a strange thing that we had.
Also really hard for us as Thai. We don't have we read as we see, right? Even some words we can we know if our language, we know which one that we have to omit. But in English, like before I learn with the real English speaker, I will spell, like I pronounce photographer, like photographer, or um, like a vegetable. This is the one that I get teased the most, like because I pronounce vegetable, and everyone like teasing me and pick on me for a long time for that word, like vegetable.
All right, so sorry, we have to move it along since we only have 8 more minutes, but we have 2 more activities. Thank you everyone for sharing, and also thank you for everyone in the chat who shared as well. Um, yeah, I'm really sorry also, and I feel for everyone who shared a story where they were discriminated against for the English they spoke. Um, that's definitely not something that we want to happen. And I really hope that changes as we, like continue to globalize and learn more about other varieties of English. But anyway, on to the next activity. So this is going to sound a little disparate compared to what we were talking about just now. So instead of talking about our varieties of English, we're going to talk a little bit about use cases. So if you scroll down, you can see it. Am I sharing screen still, Marlinda? I don't believe so.
No.
Okay, let me get on that. But in this activity, we're just going to ask everyone to share, like, what are you working on currently for the chatbots you're working on? Or sharing the right screen? Yes, I am. Or what's a context you can imagine implementing a conversational experience in? So this can be anything, like maybe you have a pet project about like some therapy chatbot or a restaurant chatbot. So feel free to write anything. And also, we'll only really spend 2 minutes on this. So if anyone wants to come
Sorry.
up on stage and just talk, we can also do that. Yeah. Sorry, Marlinda, go ahead.
No, I was just apologizing for the time. We've just been like really enjoying the discussion, so we're just like losing track of time right now. Also, I'm really loving this discussion between Jyoti and Will in the chat. I'm just like thinking, like, how do we get people to step outside of their own experiences and understand that loud doesn't necessarily mean aggressive from another speaker?
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's so tough to think about because it's definitely something cultural, something that someone who didn't grow up in a certain culture isn't going to recognize. Um, for myself, I definitely find myself needing to like keep myself in check there because my family, whenever we gather or like our family friends, it's just a big gathering of Filipinos, and I know like I've been to restaurants where like even my friends are working and they'll comment on it, and I'll get embarrassed, but also that's just how we speak and how we talk to each other. Um, and like there's no aggression there. It also doesn't sound aggressive, but to some people it's just like loud. Um, and I guess it's that difference of like, some people having like, public settings that are much quieter and more individual. But yeah, hard to think about how to work on that kind of cultural diversity, like in sensitivity.
Wires are getting crossed in my brain because now I'm thinking about like culture and anger, and I don't know for anybody in the audience, like if English is not your first language, but you want to be angry, so you kind of switch to your first language. Like I feel like some people do that, like, oh, English is not going to represent how angry I am right now. I need to start talking in Tagalog.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Chris. Diverting away a little bit from the other cases that we're talking about, but um, yeah, I guess it really depends, and also definitely depends on the use case for your bot. If it's just something casual where you're making friendly conversation and trying to get information, that might be something that works. Like how Americans are known for small talk. Whereas on the other hand, maybe it's like a knowledge base or something where you're trying to give out information or sensitive information. I think I definitely trust a more formal bot. I don't want someone that I'm interfacing with for some kind of like financial info, to be cracking jokes. I kind of just want to make sure my like the work that I need to get done, like I can trust the bot to do in a secure and safe manner. So we've spent about 4 minutes on this, so we're gonna rush over to the next one. But if anyone would like to come on stage and talk about what they're working on, um, we can do that, or we can rush to the next activity. Marlinda, is there anything you'd like to mention as well?
No, I think we can like continue on to because like activity 2 kind of goes into activity 3, so we can just continue from there and then yeah.
Yep. I'm gonna go ahead and drag everyone's sticky notes down with great difficulty, so we can make sure to look at them as we're doing activity 3. So activity 3 is conducting research. So we're trying to connect our own lived experiences and the experiences of other individuals who talked and shared with everyone in the breakout rooms or just wrote on their sticky notes or in the chat. So, like now that we've been exposed to all of these different varieties, we can think about how it applies to our own use cases. So in our own use cases, was there anything anyone mentioned that like we'll have to come up with a scenario to try to approach like, oh, how do other people say this? Or like, how do other cultures discuss this or talk about this? So we initially had a flow here where you talk about like what example you're being inspired by, what use case are you talking about, and then what scenario have you come up with. But in the in consideration of time, just feel free to use one sticky note or just drop it in the chat and we can all talk about it.
I have a comment on what Chris was saying though. I learned that there are, I forgot what culture this is, but for them, respect in tone is they have to drop the tone at the end. So, for example, like in English, and maybe a waiter will say, "Here's your food," and so they kind of like end high. But this culture, to show respect, they would drop the tone at the end, and they go, "Here's your food," and to American speakers, that sounded really rude. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know that there's going to be like a I think we're always going to have this like that sounds different to me, and we just need to really become more open-minded and not jump to the conclusion that the other person is, you know, being aggressive or rude. I think as we talk to more different cultures.
I like the first example that Jyoti has given here, because it basically applies to every chatbot I feel like I've ever made. Um, so, for example, if you look at the like insurance chatbot on the right side, if you're asking someone for information, do you say like, "Oh, please give me your like ID number," or do you say, "What is your ID number?" There are just so many different ways to spin that. So even just in like what someone might consider a standard variety of English, not that there is a specific standard. There are so many different ways already that you can phrase things syntactically that just completely changes how your bot is perceived.
English tutorial on Instagram, Duke? What? Yes. That's interesting.
I disconnected for a second there, but I do think we're just about time to wrap up. Marlinda, is there anything you'd like to say before we conclude?
No, but just that I really enjoyed the discussions that we had.
Yeah, same here. Thank you everyone for sharing, and thank you everyone for sharing what they're working on, their experiences with English, and everything.
And thank you so much for doing this and making this, prioritizing this. Where a lot of people are talking about it and actually seeing what you're doing here. And for everybody, so Salesforce is also supporting CDI Foundation. So a lot of the things that you see here and that Greg and the team are so passionate about will also sort of become part of the foundation, and we'll try and advocate that more as well. So thank you for showing this. And thank you everybody for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Hans.
I feel like we need famous last. This is the end. We have 24 people left. We had 700 in 2 days, and we made it to the end. I feel like we need a party, but I'm alone in an office now. Everybody's gone home. But
I wish I could party, but after this, we're hopping on to more work. Still like
yeah.
midday for us.
Yeah, sorry. I feel your pain. But it's interesting and important work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that. We'll do this again at the next Conversations on Festival.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I feel like we need a final song for these things. All right, next time we have a song together that we sing. We're like, thank you, Conversational AI community. All right, final dad joke. Okay. Thank you, Steve. I thought you'd never ask. God, I can't really do it anymore. I don't have it in me anymore. I find that a duck's opinion of me is very much influenced over whether or not I have breath. It's not really funny. I went to see the doctor, and all he did was suck blood from my neck. Do not go see Dr. Acula. It's been 2 long days.
And with that.
So, Steve, I expect all these jokes to be in Cookie tomorrow. That's my goal here. I want to contribute. And then I thought this was the way to get it in there. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm signing off. You can stay in the chat. We just keep it on. And oh, he's entering as we speak. Brilliant. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll see you at the next festival, or way before, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.